Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hunting for Silver Linings. Today is Thursday, February 25th, here in the Great Lakes region of the U.S. I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and joined here today, really excited because we are all things ecosystem building, and we have one of the globe's best. It's Mike Ducker. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Very happy to be here, Corey. And I'm from Michigan also, so always happy to do sort of a hometown thing.
Yes. Well, I apologize. I do bleed green and white. I did see that.
Not a problem. Not a problem. The in-laws are from Columbus, Ohio, so it kind of tells you, I'm willing to accept all in my life.
Understood. I can appreciate that. Like, and as we said before we hit record, let's just set a big table, and never leave our seats, no matter how hot the conversation gets, right?
Sure. No, no,
So,
no. And yeah, in the fall it can get hotter, as you know.
yeah. So, awesome to make your acquaintance. Here at Startup Grind, we are the globe's largest community of ecosystem builders, innovators, technologists, etc. So we geek out about all things ecosystem building. However, as much as we geek out about it and do our very best in our own ecosystems, we're kind of siloed. We're on our own. And so I'm really thrilled to have you here today to help inform maybe some of our activities, right? Maybe fill in some gaps, because most of us are just founders and just trying to help other founders, because
Sure.
we've been there, we've been through it, and we're like, man, it's certainly tough.
Sure.
If it's tough for me, it's got to be tough for somebody else. So that just giving us a little bit of context, I'd like to really hear about your personal story. I know you've spoken about a lot of other places, but our community hasn't heard it. So you have a real unique story about how you arrived at at what it means to develop ecosystems and why. So if you could help us out there.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, as I said, I'm from Michigan, and when I graduated from Central Michigan University, in 1992, I had no clue I'd be here. There was no plans to sort of be a global ecosystem builder. I was really just looking to get a job and paying off my credit card debt, and hoping to buy Cheez-Its at the grocery store without any like worry of how much money I was wasting. So I was probably like a lot of people from Michigan. I wasn't very global in minded at all. To me, crossing the Ambassador Bridge and going to Windsor or to Toronto was sort of my international travels at that point in my life when I graduated. So this was not planned at all. But I slowly got into accounting. I was an accounting major for Central Michigan, and was really focused in at that point in the early '90s on technology, because that's where technology was. It was at the enterprise. There's a lot of sort of digitalization of enterprise processes, and the heart of that was the accounting. So most of my 6 years, in accounting was really implementing systems, and both really successful implementations and just like horrible failures. And you kind of get some lessons about technology during that time. And because I was so young, and young people tend to have bigger interest in technology, I was sort of seen as the guy to make it happen and sort of communicate how to make technology work for business.
They're like, we got Mike here. Like, Mike's
Well,
the guy.
well,
Like,
yeah, exactly. He's the young. It was just like he's the youngest guy. Young people love technology, and so
yeah.
I had the
He
responsibility.
has an Atari, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly that back in the day. So that's kind of the first step. I wasn't a technologist. I didn't study computer technology at Central, but it was just something that happened. And the crazy thing is, um, when the web started to get big, and I was kind of getting frustrated. I actually started to go for an MBA at Michigan during the evening. Um, an IT company saw my resume in Monster.com. If you remember back in the '90s and when Monster was alive, I wasn't looking for. I was thinking I'd continue in accounting, but this IT company approached me and said, "We'd like you to be our sales and marketing person. Come in and pitch our company to us." And I'm an introverted accountant, and I'm like, "This is crazy. This is like a whole life change." So I decided to take on like, okay, I want to do something bigger than just accounting. So I pitched them their company for 20 minutes, and the next thing I know, I'm working for this want to be everything IT company, um, that was doing software development and systems and training. It was just this little company in Troy, Michigan, that was trying to be everything to everyone. And I, and 2 weeks in, the founder owner, who's from Taiwan, said, there's this thing about e-learning happening again. This is probably 1997, 98, really just the beginnings of e-learning, like Blackboard and a lot of these companies that are powerhouses today were just startups back in the day. We have some relationships in China. I want to do a startup around e-learning in China. And that just excited the heck out of me. I mean, at that point, China was actually a happy story for America and the world. It was opening up to the world. There was only 15 million people on the internet in China back in 97, 98.
Right.
And so I did everything wrong on sort of creating this startup of e-learning. I spent like 3 months on a business plan, doing all this research and background, and created this really, great, I guess, academic research project, but not very practical. But basically it was, we were going to,
So yeah, we didn't interview a single customer. We
no,
like
we honestly, I mean, I was totally reliant on sort of our contacts in China to kind of give me that data, and a lot of
right.
sort of web research, and but it was basically, you know there wasn't enough capacity to train the Chinese population. They were going to have to do more web learning. We had some relationships with a university there that were going to sort of resell it. We were just going to localize content that we could get from the U.S. And that was just exciting to get into. Pitch to investors, and we actually had some strategic potential investors that wanted to get in, but ultimately we pivoted, created a learning management system in China, and sold it in the United States, which wasn't as interesting to me, but the whole international part got me super excited. I was going to Michigan at the time, um, which is a very international university. And again, at that point in my life, my international travels was going across the river and going to Canada. So I was just clueless as far as a globalist, but had this desire to learn more. And so before, around my 30th birthday, right before I got married, me and my fiance, we had a bagel meeting. Again, all this processed food, Cheez-Its and bagels, that's what we learned in the 70s and 80s. But and
Mountain Dew and Fago.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly that, exactly that.
The food pyramid. Yeah.
And it's still hard to get off of it. But I went to had some bagels. Me, my fiance, and one of a Michigan student that I became friends with, and his wife. And they told me, well, they joined Peace Corps when in the early '90s in Niger, and about their time. And I was about to graduate from my MBA in Michigan, and just contemplating on my next steps. And after that breakfast engagement, I told my wife, I'm like, let's join Peace Corps. I'm like, before we like get a house and get a family and, kind of do sort of the regular American life, let's do something unique and different. Let's like just reach out. And she's always thought about it. So, we got married, and a year after that, literally I was packing when 9/11 happened to go to Kenya. So in 2001, we joined Peace Corps. We were delayed because of 9/11 by a month, and spent a little over 2.5 years in Kenya. Um, I would love to tell you how I changed the world and changed Kenya, but it probably changed me more than I changed it. My most successful accomplishment were probably two things: helping kids learn how to do a jump shot, because I was coaching basketball, and teaching them how to use computers. Back then, literally, I mean, I was teaching kids how, like, we had an IT center and we were teaching kids how to use Excel and Word and just like basic stuff. Now it's more intuitive because generations have had that technology and they don't have to learn this. But we created this IT center and it was an amazing experience over a little over 2 years, and just kind of a culture shock initially for the both of us. At one point, I think 2 weeks in, and we're like, what the hell are we doing here?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But we adjusted.
Like, how do I assimilate here? You're like,
It,
no,
it,
you,
it,
you don't.
Exactly
Like,
that. I mean, it's probably the closest thing to ever being a celebrity. I was at a 2K walk to get to a sort of a public transit stop to get to the computer center. And, during that walk, kids would be just kind of flying out, asking how I'm doing, always wanted to have a conversation. It was the closest I'll ever be to a celebrity, I guess, at that point. Um, but that just opened my eyes and I was kind of hooked. Like, I want to do this international development. I knew nothing about international development at that point in my life. And so and it turned out this is an industry. There's this people like, we want to help the developing world. We want to help do things, but there's this industry driven by money, driven by governments like U.S. government, which goes through USAID, the World Bank, and other sort of institutions. And to get in the industry, I actually just realized, there's these organizations that are trying to win money to be able to implement these types of programs and projects out there. And so, because of my marketing background, I kind of sold that to get in the industry because there's a lot of people with sort of master degrees in international development and other economics and things like that that were sort of getting in the industry. So I got into a company that was very focused on how to help the private sector become competitiveness in countries. And I basically, at that point, I was 32 or 33. I basically said, I'm happy to sweep the floors, do the dishes, but it's up or out for me. I'm too old to waste my time. I either have to absorb and quickly move up, or we're wasting each other's time because they're basically paying me half of what I made before I joined Peace Corps. And it was just like I wanted to get in, wanted to see what I could do, won them several different projects, and slowly built up my reputation around how technology could help development. They had this thing, ICT for D, information communication technology for development. At that point, it was really focused in on how it could help the economic part, and both implemented some programs in places like Egypt and Armenia that really had some really nice legs, and did a lot of research around it that became sort of well known. Really focused it on how technology at that point in the early 2000s, a lot of countries were focused technology sort of an export, India, Philippines, like, outsourcing services. But we actually were saying, how could it be more of a catalyst? How can it actually, change your industry, change the things you do in the country? And so got really deep in that. And then when entrepreneurship started to come around, I did my first entrepreneurship project, I think in 2005 in Egypt, and then another one in 2006 in Pakistan. I didn't really know much how you actually help entrepreneurs. At that point, our toolkit, and it gets to the conversation about ecosystem builders. Our toolkit was basically business plan competitions, right?
yeah.
I mean, that's what we thought. We would,
You're like, I got this. Like,
yeah. I mean, these poor kids, you tell them to do all these, build up this massive business plan. You pitch them in front of some old business people who criticize what they've done. It was really a very ineffective tool, but that's what we had in our toolkit back in 2005 and six. There's training, obviously, and most of the training was really most like a mini MBA, more than sort of the lean startup kind of like. The startups are different than a large enterprise. So that was, and we learned, that wasn't the way to do it. The big break came for me actually was when President Obama came into office. He saw that one of America's greatest tools was entrepreneurship as a diplomacy tool. I mean, who do other countries love? They love our entrepreneurs and they love our entertainers, right? I mean, I was in the Republic of Georgia when Michael Jackson died, and it was absolutely amazing to see the response in the country of how people just put up like just these makeshift sort of uh, responses to that. And the same happened when Steve Jobs died, and I was in Egypt. Um, so anyways, he created this initiative called the Global Entrepreneurship Program, and was really going to focus a lot of U.S. attention around how we could help develop, entrepreneurship in sort of Muslim majority countries. I've been working in Egypt quite often since then, and I just let everyone I know who might have some coordination with this. So this high level thing just coming down through the bureaucracies of the State Department and USAID, and I know something's going to happen. So I was just trying to like make sure everybody knew that I've done some work in here. I know Egypt. And Egypt is where he made his speech, so I knew Egypt was going to be part of this. And and they actually put a program into Egypt, and I was not the first choice. I was probably choice number 14th, but I was incredibly persistent. With the people, I was not on the right team. I mean, I everything that could have been wrong was wrong, but I still. It's probably one of the most hustle jobs I've ever gotten, if you will. So I was chosen. I was called the entrepreneur in residence. So I was, the American representative to help, create entrepreneurship in Egypt. And this is 2010 when this decision was made. So 2000 January, first week of 2011 in January. um, High level delegation. We have lots of very successful entrepreneurs going to Egypt to sort of start off this, event, because they had me, but they needed to like have a lot more firepower to show America was serious. So we had like the former CEO of CarMax, a lot of high powered guys were there. Really just had a meeting with the prime minister at the time and some of the ministers, and really just like a big wow sort of activity with the ambassador and stuff like that. And the revolution happens literally 2 weeks after this. So the
Right.
people we were
Yeah.
meeting with were either going to jail or on the run. Um, and but which was just, I mean, it was crazy. But I was sent in a month after the revolution. So the revolution is January 25th. I came in, I think March 2nd or 3rd. It was crazy. I mean, it's hard to describe, and I won't take a lot of time to describe it, but it was just such a you knew it was a unique moment in history. I mean, there's revolutions happening all the time, including in Myanmar right now. Um, but I think the world's eyes were on Egypt at that point. And it was just, every weekend something would be happening. But it turned out, revolutions are good for entrepreneurship. I mean, because there was sort of a blank. I think the past holds us back so much, and at that point, I think people are saying, "What does if you almost have like a blank slate of how do we actually create an economy and an ecosystem we want?" And it just so many people wanted to create something, and I actually had a program that could make it. And so this is where I kind of learned about ecosystem development, because when I went into Egypt, I thought I'd be retail instead of wholesale, meaning I thought I'd be just running a lot of different entrepreneurship programs, doing some training, mentor events, all these things. But the thing that I think really startled me is when, this is when Twitter was getting big, and I was on Twitter, and all these young techie kids were talking about doing something called Startup Weekend. And again, I know Startup Weekend is now a little bit passe, but back then, this is what the big thing was. There was all these international programs like Startup Weekend, Global Entrepreneurship Week, all these things just kind of proliferating, in different countries. And this would be the first one in Egypt, maybe the second, I think, in the Middle East. And so, I contacted the group and say, how can I help? And they said, well, let's have an 8 o'clock meeting. And I don't know if you know Egypt or not, but nobody meets at 8 o'clock. Nobody meets at 8 o'clock. So I was just shocked that they wanted to meet at 8 o'clock, but it was really a group from the tech community who came together, you know, and wanted to do something and saw this startup weekend and wanted to make it happen. And they were just hustling, trying to make something happen. And I was just like, how can I help? That was my first event, and it was just pow, because everyone from the region, all the big business people, all the business people from the region, all the big business people from Egypt, just wanted to help Egypt at that point. And it was just a powerful weekend where, again, it wasn't about startup weekend. It was just about this. Like, people are just helping people. The whole weekend, it was just like, how can we drive you to the next level? How can we help you? How can we make you successful? And I'm proud to say that was April of 2011. Many of the startups that actually came out of a startup weekend are still alive and still doing interesting things, or the people who were part of it have done other things since then. So there's actually startups from that weekend that are still alive and kicking and that are successful. So that, it was just like tremendous. But that lesson told me I shouldn't be retail, I should be wholesale. I need to find the change makers that are going to help build the entrepreneurs. I'm an American. We have an American program here. We really need to help people who want to help Egypt. Local. So it was really, and at that point, again, during the revolution, there were so many people trying to rethink things. There's so many people from the business community, and so for me, it was really trying to. My biggest job was really, how can I help pay for coffee breaks and little finger snack foods to get people to do events and programming, and some of them were incredibly successful. We were able to get one startup called Super Mama, which still exists on the front cover of the New York Times. So that was massive. But some of them were just like horrible. And it came down to, can I pick the right partner? Were they really committed? Were they really there to help others? We brought in a lot of successful entrepreneurs at the time. Alexis Ohanian, who started Reddit, Jeff Hoffman, who's a founder of Priceline. They all wanted to help. And it was just really me trying to, again, I called it, after I came back from Egypt, I called it ecosystem physics. Because again, I think you mentioned it, all you said, all we're trying to do is get people of experience who build companies to help entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And literally that is the ecosystem. That is the core. That is the most important part. There's nothing more important. And, and I learned that in Egypt. And there's been a lot of studies since then from our experiences, like you mentioned, that have shown that these interactions really are the heart of the ecosystem and really what you need to do. It isn't so much about training or telling people how to do it. It's really getting people to think, really connecting with people that can really help them. But not just that, really, I had a program where we called it, it was by an organization called the Startup Cup at the moment. And really, the program was like a 6-month program, and it was one of the most successful things we did. And it was just like mentoring, pitching. But that wasn't the important thing. The important thing was we had the same people there the whole time. We had really serious business people that were part of both the mentoring and pitching, and they kind of kept accountable the entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's like, we met you 3 weeks ago. What have you done? What have you accomplished? And the entrepreneurs respected those mentors so much. They kind of felt accountable to them. So, and the whole program was about how much could you push Delta? How much could you change the company over 6 weeks? I think the program was total. And that kind of program just taught me this is all about accountability. Like, if you're going to do an entrepreneurship program, creating these relationships of trust where the entrepreneur really looks up to these mentors, coaches, advisors, even if it's sort of a peer group. And you kind of create this reoccurring sort of engagement. And it really comes down to, what have you done lately? I mean, it's like, you ever hear a football athlete or any athlete, it's always about what's our last win? And it really comes down to that. And if you can create that accountability in your program, and the culture around that, it's successful. It's difficult though, because we're really talking about establishing relationships between entrepreneurs who think they know it all. I shouldn't say it like that, but a lot of them do, and sort of other people. And it's almost like, an Indian matchmaker. You need to be able to connect those entrepreneurs with people they trust and respect. And so, because it isn't so much about the advice they give, because it could be it's just like, my daughter, I could give her advice, but she's not going to listen to it. But if a coach or a teacher gives her the same advice, she'll listen to it.
Right. Stranger on the street. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of it is about having, this advice coming from people they trust. It's as much as the person it's coming from. So, I learned that deeply in Egypt. I just, came across, and when I came out of Egypt, and I literally came out. I was evacuated when June 30th of 2014. Who those who might not know, there was, the military basically decided it needed to take over, and we
Yeah.
won't talk about the
Enough of
politics.
this. Enough of this.
Exactly. And so
Right.
I literally saw the mass protest of Brotherhood people in the streets. I was driving to the airport out of the country, and would come back, I think 5 or 6 months later, to pick up my stuff, to move out. But but it was an incredible experience for me. Again, I think we had a lot of success, but when I say we, I was just trying to be an enabler. Even though I felt like I gave some advice, it came down to I was just doing my job to help give the people who are trying to build the ecosystem some resources to leverage, some knowledge from like experts in the United States.
Mhm.
But there's been a book about this by Chris Schroeder called Startup Rising that talked about the rise of startups during this period. So it was incredible, but I felt like I had some knowledge and experience, some things that I did badly, some things that didn't quite work. And there was a recognition at that point among international development and local, economic development, that entrepreneurship is a tool that we could use to create, growth. So since then, I've been part of a lot of different programs. Um, I've led a couple programs, one in Southeast Asia, really to help tech startups there. Some work in the Balkans and Peru, to help. And now I find my work is more helping donors and other development agencies think about designing and developing these programs. And I've written a couple of best practices or lessons or guides or, how to do this. And there's been a lot more since 2014 where there's so much more research about this now. I mean, back then, as a practitioner, you're kind of guessing. You're kind of like, oh, that didn't work. You try to get the data. Like, we really didn't have a lot of companies that really were growing after the point to now where there's a lot more research on how you help entrepreneurs. There's a lot more we can say scientifically, almost not a lot, but there's still a lot no more unknown. But there's a lot more focus on this. So um, I hope it wasn't too long, but that's kind of the life story, in a nutshell of why I'm here again. I didn't plan this back when I was living in Michigan, but I always tell people when I kind of introduce myself, I'm kind of like Forrest Gump. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I've had a very interesting life. So
Sure.
that's where it is.
Well, so but having been one of the few people to experience an event like Egypt, especially from the perspective and the privilege of life in Michigan, right? And then to say, okay, well, how do we create something from how do we create everything, right? Like let's create the universe. Like it's like let's invent what a big bang looks like for a business and thereby society and community and everything else. Now, like largely when we talk about ecosystem building, it can be like a lot of us boil it down to, okay, well, you need density, you need resources, and you need talent. Like, hey, you need those three things. But what I've learned from doing some research on you is that you really focus a lot of this thing about like social capital, right? So we have a lot of different types of capital, like family capital, we have money capital, we have educational capital, we have all these types of capital. But social capital may be the most important, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things you can, I think, influence and control the most. So part of it is what levers do you have as an ecosystem builder? Um, I mean, if you read, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of reports on how we could build our ecosystem in location X. I guarantee, I most of those reports you could copy and paste the recommendations, and number one or two will be access to finance.
Right.
It just always is. It's because it's a lever where governments and others can provide some, whether it's grants or
Well, and it may be
guarantees.
it may be the easiest, right?
Exactly
Let's
that.
fly over this and let's dump a pile of cash on it.
Exactly that. And when you say entrepreneurship, the next thing you know is here's our subsidized financing that we're gonna do.
Right here,
But
here's
but
the
if you look,
terms.
yeah, if you look at the data, it's not very successful. And again, and this is partly because I was actually a management accountant, and I'm always like, what is the data telling us, and what can we learn from it? But but again, my experience around social capital, again, I could put it down to that event of Startup Weekend in April of 2011, and now there's so much more data. If you look at Endeavor Insights, they've done a lot of research on this. Startup Genome, it's really about is again, you talked about the heart of it. That's the heart of it, and the fact of the matter is, you can do. I've done a lot of studies, like here's, you map the ecosystem and you try to do this gap analysis. Here's everything we have, and this is what the valley has, and how can we get from A to B? And
Everyone
that's,
wants to be the valley. Yeah.
yeah, and you create this, a report, and you have recommendations on how, how to improve access to capital, and you have recommendations on, competitions, and you need accelerators and all these things. And I just feel like that's not the way to do it. You should be doing gap analysis. It it doesn't help. I think what you need to do is, I understand for like people who have money, like governments and donors and development agencies, they have money, and so they kind of have to have some a document, a report that says this is our strategy, and this is the reason for our strategy. To me, it's about leveraging what you got. There are some countries that their universities, their institutional universities, are so strong. The alumni of those universities are so strong. Um, People respect the universities. Like in Vietnam, and in Peru, you start at the universities. In other countries, like in the Balkans, it was very much driven bottom up. I felt, by a lot of the tech community. You see, so you really, as I pointed out, sort of in the Egypt example, there's just people who have a desire to do something, and so I feel like, as you're kind of hinting at, Corey, how do you start? You have to find. It's like a startup.
Hmm.
I mean, your long term vision and strategy might be one thing, but how to create momentum and hack that momentum is something else. And for an ecosystem, you really need to hack what you have, where you can drive momentum. And the big thing I learned over the last 2 years, and there's a researcher at MIT. I'll send you the report that really helped me really crystallize ecosystem development. Is that when you look at a broad ecosystem, like an entrepreneurship ecosystem, there's communities in that, right? I mean, there's a makerspace community. There's a community about inclusion, which could include gender and minorities. There's a community in the tech space. There's a community just wants to make sure your small businesses can be profitable and stay in business. There's lots of communities, and these communities get together because there's purpose. They're like, they feel like they have a passion about this. It's not, and part of it is finding which communities have the biggest passion that you can drive the furthest. And sometimes, and part of the issues I have with governments and donors is really, I really try to, like, what do you really want to accomplish? Because you're not going to accomplish the Valley or Boston or anything like this. And let's find how we can create those leverage points within your ecosystem to drive that, because you don't have enough money to change the world. Um, you
So
know,
what, like, I mean, just to lean on this point. So you're asking, like, what does success look like for us here? So
e-
can you,
exactly.
like, when we're talking about like an emerging, like, a community of entrepreneurs, or like, what, how does that conversation, what does that conversation look like, on the ground? I'm really curious.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think what success looks like is not lots of unicorns.
Right. Yeah.
We look at just to kind of get to the economics. Um, if you're in the economic development field and you're looking at entrepreneurships and startups as the reason to do it, the data shows us is what you want is high growth. So what you're not looking for is unicorns. What you're looking for is Inc. 5,000 companies,
Right.
right? Those are still 5 to 8% of your enterprise probably population. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, and if you look at the Inc. 5,000, you'll see maybe 4 to 5% of them actually get venture capital funding. In fact, most of them are self-funded or
Yeah.
are using their credit cards and
Yeah.
mortgages and things like that. They're leveraging sort of the credit
Well, and
that they have.
it's the I have more conversations with entrepreneurs about like, why do you want an investor? Like, why can't
Yeah,
you just do this yourself?
yeah,
Like how many marriages do you need? Like,
exactly. And I could talk a little bit about the investor side a little bit later with Valhalla. But so I think if you kind of put because the investment picture, I think captures a lot of the media space.
yeah.
It really captures a lot of how we focus. And I think if you take that space piece out a little bit and
Hmm.
open it up, you say we just want growth. For example, like we
Can
really
I
just want
can we just feed more families? Can we just
exactly.
hire more employees? Put more people in school? Can we just do
Yeah,
that? Like, can
exactly. Well,
like let's not worry about the valuation of my company. Like,
exactly that and that those indicators
yeah.
skew everything. It's not that they're important, it's that we overemphasize them. I don't want to say that venture capital and other things are not important. It's just there's overemphasis within entrepreneurship. So if it's just about like growth and then you focus on growth. And one of the things I would talk to or let people know, if you want to see a great case study on this, look at Babson College's scale up programs, which they've done in Colombia and Guatemala and other places where they're just trying to get car washes and construction companies just to get to 20 to 30% growth, and that
Right.
creates jobs. And so getting people to define what success is really important and something more practical. And again, I think everyone wants that unicorn in their country or in the continent. It really drives the imaginations of lots of people. I mean, and that's great, and we should never discount it, but we should definitely try to de-emphasize it a little bit. Um, and what you're trying to do is just trying to find a group to really coalesce around a mission, around a purpose. It might be again about women entrepreneurship. It might be about maker spaces, and then having very practical, I don't want to say practical, but ambitious goals and objectives to get to, especially in the short term. I mean, again, we know this is decades in the making. When startup communities and Brad Feld made his book, it's like you got to beat this in the long term. Like this is in the decades and generations in the making. But in the short time, you need to have practical things, because I think the storytelling and leveraging the media and the mindset changes are so important. So anything that looks like success, when you can have a founder who is struggling financially, doesn't have all the assets, and she can make her business into a 2 3 4 million dollar, that's a success. And it's not that people need to know that she's not a unicorn, but you can talk about her struggles, you can talk about the story, and you can communicate these things, which creates again another impression of what a hero is. So I think a lot of what I think ecosystem builders are now saying is storytelling and getting the story out through proper communication channels is so important, so important. So any program I have now, there just has to be a lot of emphasis on the communication part. And I want a journalist in there. I want someone who's going to get there and get the story. I don't want someone to just talk about the numbers. Of course, the people who support these things want numbers, which is important, but I think you want stories, and not just stories about the entrepreneur, stories about the mentor that helped. When I was in Egypt, we got in a couple of the morning shows, and I would always just try to push, like, let's get a mentor and an entrepreneur in that show to talk about the relationship, you know,
Mhm.
and I think creating some success, just getting something out there that feels different, that feels unique than what's been happening in the past. And then just communicating the heck out of it with great storytelling is going to create more momentum. And then more people are going to want to join. So again, I think finding, your, your group, your community that has real purpose around something, getting something that creates success and then, that drives success. And then it starts branching out into like other domains out there, but, that to me is how you get things going. When we were in Egypt, it was really, obviously the tech community is one of the best driven, purpose driven communities out there. And it's easy to get stuff going. So why do people always ask me why is tech so dominant? Because it's much easier to get them driven around a purpose.
People are like, I'm not into tech. I'm like, are you sure? Like,
Exactly.
What do you do? Like, tell me your first interaction of your
Yeah.
day, and how like when are you interfacing with tech?
Exactly, and it's a very open community. I mean, the open source community, they're driven by different, maybe because they have other financial options, but they're driven by different things than just financial, living day to day. And so it's easier to, they're more passionate about purpose in specific areas. Let me just mention one thing more. We talked about a little bit, but I just want to like totally overemphasize this about the social capital.
Yeah.
Whenever I go into a new country, I'm looking probably for two things: a champion, which is typically um, an entrepreneur who's done it, been there, done that, who wants to give back, who's really, there might be a little ego in what they're doing, but it's really more heart and desire for the next generation. And you find these people and you basically ask them, how can I help you? You know, and that's the key. You find two or three, champions, and I'm sure you're one of them, in Grand Rapids, Corey, in your city, it'll be great. And the second thing is, like I said, getting the people from the private sector to be mentors, coaches, advisors, angels, is super super important. So a lot of the programs I've done is really just like awareness events, orientation sessions, getting the actors like the accelerators, incubators, any sort of organization helping entrepreneurs that sort of build up its network of supporters from the business community, to me is like critical part of the ecosystem. So I hope that helps with that ecosystem question.
Well, of course, yeah, absolutely. And what I'm interested in is also like, so we have this global event of this last year here, okay, and it has accelerated trends, right? We have emerging ecosystems where they had, dual currencies. Like there's the black market, and then there's like the actual, like we have informal economies, etc., that have been washed away because generations are now like, oh, you mean it's as easy as just using my cell phone?
Yeah.
And we have infrastructure that has been accelerated. Like so many things around this planet have been accelerated, 10, 100, 1000x in this last year alone. I'm really interested to hear your ideas, your impressions, and what do you think are the, what are you excited about? I know it's like it's obviously there's a lot of tragedy that is born out of this. However, as entrepreneurs, we can't help but say we're also kind of excited.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't deny the tragedy as we, passed 500,000 deaths here in the United States. It's, in many ways, it's, I mean, we're not here to talk about that, what's happened, but we have to definitely reflect on that. Technology wise, as you said, and there, and there's smarter people who have talked about this, it's probably accelerated technology adaptation so much faster. I mean, I'm very still old school. I like to, I'd love to have beer with you in Grand Rapids. I understand Grand Rapids has a great brewery situation over there, and kind of meet you and build up that trust. But I think, you know, I think that's accelerated now, that we don't actually have to meet people as much as we used to, to build that trust and that accountability and things like this. Because one of the things I learned in mentoring, for example, is that you really needed to do sort of physical connections before it could kind of become a virtual relationship. But this might change things like this. Like so I think, I mean, I don't know how and in what fashion, and I'm guessing there'll be sort of an opposite reaction once we're able to talk to people again in person, that we'll all just
Right.
want to
We'll see
hug
how
and
we'll see how much the pendulum swings, right?
yeah, but I'm sure there's some, there's definitely something probably recalibrating in our mind. I mean, like my daughter's already all virtual, she can easily, I think, build trust and feel like she's in a virtual world. But maybe people older like myself, I'm probably more comfortable than I was, because I always felt like I always have to do first meeting in person. So I'm sure a lot of that is changed, and there's lots of people who've written really nice blogs about this. Um, the whole theory of entrepreneurship is creative destruction. The problem is people don't want to focus on the destruction part, but where we've seen change that creates great opportunity. And and this is the difficulty for policymakers is, that industry that's kind of holding you up and creating all those jobs or keeping those jobs, but those jobs are disappearing in Detroit, and the auto industry is just an example of that. So you keep on sort of just supporting it. And you're actually not helping it because you're preventing the natural occurrence. It kind of needs to happen for uncompetitive businesses in industries to disappear, which create new opportunities. It lets people, I mean, people have hardship, but it's over time we have seen, and the research has shown, they'll look at other opportunities and create their own companies. I mean, what's happened in Nokia in Finland is a great example of that. There's so many startups that came out of that company. So I think we have to, as you said, recognize the pain that we have, but also realize that, this will create new opportunities. And, in the long run, it's probably better off because, I don't want to say better off before COVID, because I don't think so. But, in the long run, there will be some, better and more opportunistic things that come out of it.
Yeah, I really did. I appreciated your study of Flint, and then obviously recognize how like Flint wasn't always like Flint was great, but then it became Detroit, right?
Yeah,
And now
I don't. I'm writing a book right now, so and it's going to cover two cities, Detroit and Seattle, and I'm looking at 100-year history of what's happened because uh, literally the auto sector and the aviation sector will start at the same time. Both regions really benefited from natural resources. At one point, Michigan was the biggest producer of timber, and that switched over to Washington. They're very big union states. And so, but they're very different economically, socially, culturally. And so I've been literally on a 3-year journey, and I'm sure I'm at least another 2 years from getting this out of comparing these two places and what happened and why these look so differently, and in the stability and the economics are just crazy different. So and also there's a lot. So since I wrote that article, Flint is just, anyways, I won't go too much into it, but I would suggest anybody's interested, look at the history of Billy Durant, who many people don't know is the founder of General Motors, who loved Flint. And much of the reason there was so much manufacturing there is because he loved this city, and maybe he went too hard in actually developing a lot of manufacturing in this city. And actually him and Walter Chrysler got into, when Walter Chrysler looked for General Motors, they actually got in an argument that he thought there's too much manufacturing in Flint and General Motors was taking a risk. Um, and so his actual, he loved the city and his city supported him. He created a lot of crazy financial transactions that I think even Elon Musk would be jealous of. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but I know this might be a little bit of Michigan audience, so I'll take a little bit of time. Um, Billy Durant got kicked out of General Motors. He started General Motors, got kicked out because he was just a wheeler deal. He was almost like a venture capitalist in the automotive startups, but he didn't know that he needed to make smaller bets. He would just buy out companies and said, this industry is going to explode. Let me just try to buy out things. Some are going to die, some are going to fail. So he got kicked out of his company, and he was mad. He got kicked out by the New York bankers. So he started Chevrolet with Louis Chevrolet. He just loved Louis Chevrolet's name. Louis Chevrolet was actually a race car driver and kind of had a brand. So he built up Chevrolet to start to compete with the Model T. But his bigger picture was he actually was able to get Chevrolet to buy out General Motors. So he built up the brand. It was crazy. And then he was able to convince enough people to buy General Motors stock. So he got the Flint community. And so by having his people from Flint buy up General Motors stock, he was able to sort of regain control of General Motors. And he worked with the DuPonts to kind of get another set of pot of money there because they were a major shareholder and convinced them to buy it. So if you want to read, I don't think, if you want to understand Detroit and Flint, you actually have to go back to the 1910s and 20s and 30s because everything was set then. It wasn't the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I'll stop there though. From that, because I could talk about that forever.
Right. Well, a lot of times when I talk about different ecosystems and the values that different ecosystems bring, we go to like mindset and culture. So you brought it up right there. Like, there's a reason why you have to study both. Like you have to study Seattle and you have to just study Detroit. Two different mindsets, and they bring two different things to the table. Like there's a reason why Tesla wasn't created in Detroit. Like there's a reason
absolutely.
Why. There's a reason why it wasn't created in Munich or in Austria. Other automotive capitals. It wasn't created in Italy. But all of these regions support Tesla now, but in the ways that they can, the ways that they do well. Much also why like Michigan's really great at supporting the efforts to create millions and millions and millions of vaccines. We're just really good at like process right now.
That's well said, and how we basically help save World War II because of our manufacturing capabilities during that time. But Corey, do you mind if I just talk about Valhalla a little bit? While we're
I want to, yeah. See, it was, it's really important to understand. Okay, like who you are, where you came from, and how, of course, that informs why you where you're at now and what are you doing now.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my big commitments now is I work for Valhalla Private Capital, which is basically a group of investors that come out of Western Canada that have a very different perspective about early stage investing. And actually, I established a relationship long before I actually joined them. I was actually in Myanmar where they were doing some work and I was doing some work. And I'm like, wow, you guys are amazing. How can, how can I help you? Because they're really good at unlocking capital, especially in these mid-sized, smaller regions that'll never be a Silicon Valley, because they don't look for unicorns. They look for, singles and doubles, because and they have a toolkit, which really is really interesting of how to structure deals that are not just pure equity deals. I mean, if you go to any country where I work and you ask how many M&A transactions have there been in the last 5 years, you'll be lucky to get one or two hands up. Most of these investors are going to struggle to sort of, get their money back from just a pure equity deal. And so, Valhalla has, because they're based in Western Canada and Calgary and work in, in cities that many of us don't know, how can you when you're going to be focused in on very practical companies that are just going to be really good growth companies, there's other ways to structure things, including, debt, including royalty, and including, medleys of that. And so these guys have been really smart on that. And so when I brought them to other countries and I talked to other high wealth individuals, they click right away, because when I did this work in in Egypt, the State Department, there's the guy who's running this global entrepreneurship program, and he told me, create an angel group. And I knew enough. I mean, I could Google and knew enough about angel investing as anybody who, is a little bit in the space, but really has never really written a check themselves. But really, I was lucky enough that I came across some people who wanted to help their country, and willing to invest and put money in. And I brought in some expertise from different parts of America, including New York and other places. But these guys were different in that they like, okay, we know we're not, from the top star city. We know even if we do have a superstar entrepreneur, more than likely the Valley VCs are going to find them at some point
Right.
and screw us. So so we'll always kind of look for the potential unicorn, but let's be more practical about this and how we can help are really good companies that are going to grow at 30, 40, whatever percent. How can we deploy capital, guard our risk, and still get money back? And so they were really smart on, other structures. They actually had a spin out of a debt venture fund that has grown tremendously in the last 3, 4 years because it's just needed out there. And in the countries I work in, um, the issue is not venture capital per se. I mean, there is an issue, but it isn't as massive. They're not getting other types of capital that is needed. And again, what I said before, if you look at the United States, I think that distinguishes it, in Canada and other developed countries, is that people have wealth to start companies. They have their own personal wealth. They have personal capital or personal credit with credit cards and mortgages. This is the driver. And in developing countries where I work, they don't have a lot of their own personal capital. They
Yeah,
don't have
they don't
access,
have the generational wealth
and they
that
don't
are
have
there.
exactly,
Yeah.
and they don't have access to credit cards as easily as, I mean, many Americans could easily accumulate 30, 40, $100,000 worth of credit card debt. I don't suggest it, and I'm not advising that, but there's
But
been
it's available.
it's
Like you can,
available, and
you
many
can,
great companies started that way. Um, so a lot of people are looking for venture capital to fill a void that is provided by a different mechanism, a different financial vehicle, and what Valhalla has been able to do is sort of be able to practically say, let's think of other mechanisms that will make sure that investors get their money back because they are investors, they are entrepreneurs, and so wherever we bring them in the world, they have a more practical understanding of how this done. So they've gone from like an angel group, they've been around for 30 years. They've developed their own funds. They have an M&A practice now because they realize they have to start talking to the companies early. They think about sort of their future and how the investors will ultimately, get returns on their money. So it's, it was sort of a natural thing, when I sort of opened myself up to other opportunities, I had this ongoing relationship with Valhalla, and we've been working on projects like in Pakistan, helping women entrepreneurs prepare for financing. And again, this is an industry where you have to have done it. You can't be academic about it. And so it's really nice to have like real investors being able to engage on these points.
um, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to have been able to speak with you because again, we are a collection of 700 plus ecosystem builders, um, and each one of us is kind of like we're starving for resources, right? Like we have piles of entrepreneurs like in our flock that are like, hey boss, like what do what do I do, like what do I do, where do I go, and we want to be the ones with the answers. But to your point earlier, like the toolkit isn't the same like for everywhere, right? um, and so if people like you and Valhalla can be a part of that answer, especially because like VC isn't the cure all, it's not the panacea. And I really appreciate you saying like, yeah, maybe a simple like debt note is all is all that's going to take to get you to that 30, 40, 50%, 80% growth. Like not everyone's going to grow 800% a year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to bring it home to Michigan, I challenge people to look at Henry Ford. He had like four or five, I can't remember exactly, angel investors. in today's money, I think it'd be 200,000 to 300,000. That's it. He created the largest manufacturing company in the world with that little amount of money. It was all cash flow. He hit product market fit like no one's hit product market fit ever,
Right.
with the Model T. And so, you know, based on that, he dominated the banks. So the thought that we need venture capital, um, and he was so anti New York banking establishment where most of the capital was back in the early 1900s, so he would, never really take that. But, there's a lot of examples of great companies that never took on venture capital, and Detroit's own Henry Ford is probably one of the greatest examples. Those angel investors, and one of them strategic with the Dodge brothers, but they made more than the initial Facebook investors did. Um, you
Right.
know, they made out pretty. I think maybe they put in like 20, 30,000, for example, and they came out with 30 million. It was just
Hmm.
like crazy returns, and I think less than maybe 5 or 6 years. So there's other models out there. Again, I don't want to be one of these anti venture capital or anti Silicon Valley. It's great, but it's just a small. It's not America. America is much bigger than that. Every time I go overseas, everyone just thinks America is venture capital, and I'm like, no,
Right.
that's part of America. That's part of America's story. But there's thousands of other ways we grow and support companies, in America.
Yeah, and I have to get this in there, but like uh the poor Ford would be rolling over if like, because now they can't even bring a Mustang to market. Like they can't even bring cars to market anymore. This poor company.
Yeah,
So,
again, that's another story. But I
right.
mean,
So the
but remember that before Silicon Valley, there was Detroit, and in the 1900s, the smartest, most brilliant people in 1910s, 1920s were coming to Detroit for this industry. And then it lost it for various reasons.
Yeah. So I know we're already over our time here, but one of the last things that I need to ask, and I always ask of everybody. So we have our global collection of ecosystem builders. There's 700 plus of us, 125 countries. Um, what can we, like the Corey Harts all over the planet? What can we do for Mike Ducker? What can we do for Valhalla?
I mean, well, let me just, I'll just kind of put a plug for Startup Grind first. I mean, I've met several of your colleagues in Egypt and Jordan and Vietnam and other
Oh,
places.
Mo and Jordan. You
I
know
know
Mo?
Mo and Jordan.
Mo is amazing.
Yes, yes.
Like,
He's a very, he's big, and you need to know Mo if you're going to do anything in the ecosystem in the Middle East, not just Jordan. Um, but so it's a great organization, and I really, respect sort of these whole. It's not so much about Startup Grind. It's about these local organizers like Mo and you, Corey, and others who kind of just take the time out because I don't think people realize it's not like you're getting paid to do this.
no, I do this because it fills me up. That not with
It,
money.
exactly that.
Like,
You do it for your love, and again, you have a purpose. Like you really want to help your community grow its entrepreneurs, and the best way to do that is to connect people. And so, I always applaud, yourselves and Startup Grind, because there's a global aspect of this, and again, there's data around this. The more you're globally connected, the better your ecosystem. So there's a reason there's a reason global cities like Washington D.C. and cities 60 miles north of it, Baltimore, why there's a huge difference, and that global connection is the reason for it. Um, but that said, if people really want to grow and unlock local capital, in their local community, as I said, Valhalla has experience with other cities that are not Boston, New York, and Vegas, ways where we know how to talk to uh, high wealth individuals who are probably putting their money into their cousin's business, their nephew's business, and real estate. How to sort of help them think about how to not how to diversify their portfolio and take advantage of entrepreneurship in ways that, you know, they feel safe with, and to be able to sort of grow that and help their communities sort of grow a sort of next generation of entrepreneurs. So if people are, you know, interested in that, I'm sure you'll have my contacts there, but, you know, happy to talk to you about that.
Yep. So maybe I don't know, like can you be a little more specific about the kind of person you want reaching out, like where they are in their journey?
Sure,
Like
sure.
what?
I mean,
Yeah.
the people. Thanks for that question. You know,
Like I
hey,
don't want to
Mike,
load your
get to
email
the
box.
details, Mike. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I mean, if you're, I mean, the types of organizations that have contacted us are, you know, like universities who want to leverage their alumni group to create like a university angel group, and also want to help the entrepreneurs learn how to fundraise, like really learn how to fundraise, not how to
Mhm.
build your company, but, you know, the actual steps and process and sequencing and thinking and strategies you need to prepare yourself to engage with an investor. So it's more than how do you do your 10 or 12 slide pitch. It's really how do you
Right.
prepare yourself so people aren't surprised and really your story's on there. And, you know, and strategically you've thought about this, so you know what the best vehicle and best structure you should have for your company, because a lot of entrepreneurs are pushed into venture, as you said, there, and you're basically almost marrying sometimes,
Yeah.
you know.
And then you own 9% of your own company and you're like, how
Yeah,
did I get here?
exactly. And for some companies, it works, and so for other companies, it doesn't. And so it's really because there's such a push to put people down that pipeline. Companies need to understand the different ways they can get financing and structure themselves, you know, and it should align to their long-term strategy, you know, for that. And
Right.
so we help on both sides. We help the investors realize how they can take a part of their capital and portfolio, and we help organizations that want to organize the groups to, you know, realize how to do that. And then the second part of that is, you know, we help the entrepreneurs really get into the weeds and the details of how to structure, you know, something, and help organizations develop programs on how to fundraise and really, you know, do the financial strategies they need to do. And then we connect, and the thing is, we're investors, so um, we've invested all over the world, including places like South Sudan, which is one of the most hostile, volatile places. But we found a mechanism to be able to invest in an engineering company, and that's turned out pretty good for the investors that have invested in that. So at the end of the day, we're investors, and we invested in places where we actually have supported in many places. We went into Vietnam, uh, and we invested in, or in the process of investing in, a woman who's creating basically the McDonald's of motorcycle repairs. Because if you've ever been to Southeast Asia, you know motorcycles are the largest ways. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're wanting to build communities and programs like that, you know, let me know. Thanks again, Corey, for trying to like, you know, you're like my wife and daughter, like, get to the point, Mike.
Clarity, Mike.
Yeah, exactly that.
But I do want to introduce my colleague here, Yorgo. Just real quick, do you have a few more minutes, Mike?
Sure, not a problem.
Okay.
Mike, good morning and apologies. I just wrote in my note here that I drove all day yesterday from Toledo, Ohio to Oklahoma City. And this morning, because of the time change, I missed you. I'm really sorry for that. It must have been a great interview. I've seen what you have done with Valhalla, and I think that you're very fortunate in being an ecosystem that was taking off because of GovTech, because of health tech, but also because of systemic interaction between academia and capital. Because I think that the greater Washington, D.C. area is essentially GovTech and cybersecurity these days, right? With the healthcare piggybacking on all this and developing as we go ahead. Fintech is something that is slowly beginning to emerge in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And I think the area where you are, Maryland, is developing very rapidly, actually.
Yeah, I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside of Washington D.C. As you said. I engage a little bit in the ecosystem, and actually I engage more in the Baltimore region, which
Because of valuation?
No, it's just to be honest, I just feel more tied to Maryland. Washington D.C. will be fine, as you said. There's so many things happening, driven a lot by government. I mean, another sort of growing area is social entrepreneurship. There's so many NGOs here, so a lot of the impact investing, social entrepreneurship activities. There's a lot going on, and some of the best organizations thinking, doing, researching about that topic are here in D.C. because there's a lot of development money here. So, and here in Maryland, as you said, we're, because of John Hopkins, we're very strong in health.
Sure.
And because of NSA, we're very strong in security. So you're always meeting these security startups that just like blow your mind away of how they think about security, in ways that someone like me would never imagine. But the region, I think, is, I don't want to say the government is always critical for this region, but I think it's diversified a little bit because of the government. I think we've seen a lot of, like I said, a lot of things around social entrepreneurship that has happened in the country because of a lot of the NGOs that are here. I think we've seen, and because it's such a young city, it's one of the youngest cities, I believe, in the country, and very educated, overly. The county I live in, I think, is the most educated county in the country. Maybe to Boston, I think I just saw, or, very diverse. So besides the federal government, all these things influence how we think about, entrepreneurship. Here in Maryland, there's a big push for inclusion for obvious reasons. But part of it because we're so diverse, and, and people have missed out on a lot of these opportunities. So, I help with the Baltimore Accelerator, and they're very, focused in on that right now. And so, if the federal government cut its budget in half today, this region would suffer tremendously. There's no doubt about that. But it still, I think, has decoupled a little bit and has grown in some other areas, around it. For example, having the strongest infrastructure really helped launch AOL, back in Virginia back in the day. And there's a lot of the telecom stuff, also came out of here. So it's an incredibly dynamic area. But at the same time, like I said, if you compare Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, they're so unique, and the international part can't be distinguished. I mean, when you go to Baltimore, they're homers. I mean, they really love their city. They love where they come from. They could tell you about Cal Ripken and a bunch of other things. When you're from Washington, D.C., no one's barely from here. You meet people from all over the world. And that is like Startup Grind, those connections just create so much opportunity. There's Ethiopia communities here. There's massive sort of first generation, second generation African communities, a lot of capital in between here and Africa going back and forth. It just, that type of dynamics. I know you kind of came in from sort of an industry or technology perspective, but from a social cultural perspective, those things are just as important, I think, because it just creates opportunities that you can't analyze as an local economic development person. You kind of, for me, ecosystem development is not about sort of farming. Like you have your plot of land and you put in your seeds and you're putting your other inputs, the fertilizer to grow it. Because you kind of know it. You kind of can analyze this, and there's lots of technology to really, be a strong farmer and how to. You can't, for me in ecosystems, you want this reoccurring thing where you can't control. No one can control it. The governance doesn't allow for that. Everyone is, there's even competition in the ecosystem. Sometimes trees go higher than other trees, and that's healthy. And so, when I always just kind of get a little bit nervous when I start talking about industries and sectors. That stuff, is fun and interesting. And, and governments can sometimes have played influence on that. But I'm just like, how can we sprout the things to help the ecosystem and just let it go, as they are? So I don't think I answered your question at all, but that's just my comment.
Well, actually, you're doing something very valuable, Mike. You're summarizing about a year's worth of discussions. You're highlighting, as we speak, first of all, what Professor Markman said, that you need a reef, you need an anchor on which the little fish will come to do the fishing, the spawning, the growing.
Well, and the reef always has to be interesting.
Absolutely, yes.
It can't be
So
dull.
the second point that you're raising, Mike, is that it takes a village to raise a child. And you don't know what child is going to be, how big, how small, how wide, what color, what race, whatever. But it's going to be a child. And that is extremely important. The third aspect is that, as we've seen from all our interviews over the last year or so, there is a mind frame that is very relevant and very important. And you are very much touching on this. The idea of being positive, of giving back, of giving unconditionally, of creating friends, not business, and so on and so forth, because it is out of these relationships that the opportunity will arise. And lastly, I think, and this is a very important thing, is to be able to remain open in adversity, not to close down.
You summarized so much better than I could in 4 or 5 minutes, and then I did in the 45. Thank you, Giorgio. Perfect. And let me just the mindset change as I work in developing countries is always number one for me. And again, you're not changing everyone, but
just enough, right?
Enough.
Yeah.
And it isn't just about the techies. I always go back to Egypt. And in Egypt, when you're dating, there comes a point where you have to introduce your potential spouse to the mothers. There's just this coffee meeting that happens where the two and I was living in Egypt. It was always interesting. I'd be in the coffee shop observing this. There'd be two young, a man and a woman, and their two mothers would be there, kind of just eyeing, the other person, and you're like, can I influence that mother? Because when she or he introduces, their son or daughter and says, I'm dating Ahmed. He's, doing a startup. What is their response going to be? Why is he working for the government? Why is he working for a big corporation? So in mindset, I think sometimes you even have to think bigger, because those cultural influences are so great when, in many of the countries I work in, I've worked with entrepreneurs who didn't tell their parents that are doing a startup because their brother works, at a multinational corporation as an engineer. And why can't he do that, and get married and have the life we're all supposed to have?
Why can't you be more like your brother? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I found in many of the countries, and it's changing. I mean, I think this global movement is a global movement and has changed quite a number of the mindset. And as you said, Giorgio, this village is a global village, and we're kind of trying to push those old feelings about what people are supposed to do in their lives. But I always go back to that coffee meeting, as I'm thinking about it, what would, that mother's response be when, that future potential, sister or son or daughter-in-law says they want to be in a startup, is it going to be negative? Because if it's negative, you have so much work to do. Because that influences everything. We all know that. We all know our parents or our friends, if they're not behind you, you really have, it kills entrepreneurship and startups. So, one of if you look at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, one of the best data points it has in its reports, and in its country level, unfortunately, is how people perceive entrepreneurs. How does culture and society perceive it? And to me, that's one of the most important things when I look at a new ecosystem. Is there cultural support for it? Because it's easier to do things, and if there isn't, you really have to work on that mindset change and really do the storytelling and the media stuff that I talked about earlier.
It is fascinating. I'm sorry, Corey, because this last point that Mike has raised is something that I've been looking at from different angles for more than 25 years. I mean, I've been involved in regional development. I've been involved in import substitution, export promotion, restructuring of industries, and so on and so forth. And very early on, in the 90s, I worked with the Textile Clothing and Footwear Development Authority in Australia. And if you remember those years, the Australian government was exporting raw wool, and it was importing all the high value added components, including worsted fabrics, woolen fabrics, high quality cashmere blended with wool, and so on and so forth. So for every dollar they were earning from exports, they were paying $100 for imports. I think the point that you're raising is really how can we define competitive advantage in the modern world? How can we make it sustainable? And the answer has to be with, first of all, innovation in people. What I mean in this regard is that the relationships are fundamental. When we talk to East Africa, West Africa, with very few exceptions, like for instance, Lagos, the rest of Africa is relying on friends and family. Now, if you go back 2,000, 3,000, whatever thousand years ago you want to go back, you see that it was entrepreneurship, not government employment, that was the source of income. It was, in fact, expected that once you did well financially, then you would go and apply some of this wealth that you had in a way of giving it back through service to government. Government jobs were never paid for in the early days, right? So it was a kind of recognition by the community that you had achieved something, and by joining government, you're going to bring back something to the community. Fast forward, I think we're beginning to see that in our community in Startup Grind. We're beginning to see serial entrepreneurs giving back. And I'm extremely encouraged by not only the big names' commitment to giving back some of their wealth, but active wealth generation and transmission within the intergenerational context, but also within the international context. I mean, I hope that Corey and I, with your help and help of other members of the ecosystem, will be able to have soon transnational business with, for instance, Yorgo in Plovdiv in Bulgaria, with Mo in Jordan. It goes on and on and on and on. Because I think that is going to be the next level of collaboration.
Absolutely. I mean, I know we're past our time, but 2 points. One is the global side of this. We generally, and I think there's even academic definitions of an ecosystem is sort of a geographic area. But I feel like in core we talked about COVID, and some of the impacts of COVID. I feel like there's ecosystems don't have to be defined by geography. They can be defined by a technology. We're all exactly a mental connection, I think. And so I think, in the Startup Grind, I think is a perfect example of like-minded people across the world who have come together, both helping their local economy, but also I think finding probably some joy in happiness and connecting to each other, I'm guessing, because they have a common purpose around it, and they're dealing with similar issues, in many ways. Your comment on innovative people is right on. Companies don't create great companies; people create great companies, and everything we can do as a government, as ecosystems, to help people thrive, will help entrepreneurs and startups thrive. And so, as you said, we work on the coral. And to me, the core of the coral is people. If governments ask me, when governments ask me, Mike, how can we help entrepreneurs? They generally want, Mike, tell me I need to develop a government venture fund or support an accelerator or all these very.
What check can I write?
Yeah, like give me a very short-term hack.
Who do I make this check out to?
and they get very disappointed. I'm like, just educate your people, focus on the wealth and happiness and livelihood of your people, and good things will happen. So I totally agree with you. This is the people's business, entrepreneurship and ecosystem development, where as much about supporting the growth of people as much as supporting the growth of businesses, because successful people create successful businesses, in no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And for the interest of time, what I would like to do is the following. There is 4 areas that over the last several months I've been very heavily involved. One is new initial coin offerings in cryptocurrencies. The second is the next level of artificial intelligence and machine language. The third is neural brain technologies. And the last one is disturbing fintech, really high quality fintech, looking at millennials. when you have time, I would like Corey and I to have another conference with you. It's not going to be recorded, where I want to show you what we're doing, and we can follow up with ideas and what you think about it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Always, always happy to help. I'm always, I'm always, listen, I mean, we all sort of live in sort of drive off of the benefit of others. I mean, there's a lot of the knowledge I have was driven by others, and, have been coached, and, and look at the research. So always happy to, do it. That said, I'm not as smart. I told Corey before you joined, I'm like Forrest Gump. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm just, I've had an interesting life. And so, I've had some lessons. So when you get into some of this deep tech stuff, I'm like, I remember trying to mentor a blockchain startup, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time, helping you, and I don't think I can help you, so I don't think we should do this. But I'll help you as much as I can, but I'm not as smart as maybe I have a lot of experience, but
I think your Midwest nice is showing. Your Michigan apologist is
yeah.
So,
but happy to have a conversation about that.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your time.
So with all that, I thanks for letting us go over the time. I appreciate the generosity for you being with us here today. I know our ecosystem builders around the world, around the planet, will find this very valuable. Hopefully we get to do maybe a 2.0 like in a little while. It'd be fun to have you back. And then last thing,
it'd be great to do like I don't want to call it a panel discussion, but just a couple of us. I mean, I think for people to compare stories is I'm sure you have. I mean, I saw some of your broadcasts, and they look like really smart, intelligent, passionate people. And I'm sure if as we're doing right now, crossing ideas between each other, I think that would be a fun and interesting conversation.
well, yeah. If like honestly, you just say the word. If you pick the directors and the regions that you want to have on this panel, we'll make it happen. If you want. If you want Mo from Jordan, and you want Paul from Monterey, and you want Luca from Santiago, and you want Jason from Australia, you just say the word.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, given COVID, my social calendar is, not full up. So, I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be an appropriate time to do something for a follow-up. But an hour and a half, I can't even get an hour and a half with my daughter. So, I'm sure people will need to sort of take this in and, have a little bit of time before talking again.
Of course, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And lastly, like, how do people find you seriously? Do you prefer LinkedIn? Do you have an email address you want to give out, or?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can look me up on Mike Ducker on LinkedIn. I'm not the former CEO of FedEx. I'm the other one. So, and then, you could reach me. I'll just give my Valhalla email at Mike@Valhalla Private Cap.com. Mike@Valhalla Private Cap.com. I'm sorry, it's a mouthful and an email full, but yeah, happy again to engage and see how we can help.
All right, Mike, thanks so much again. Really a pleasure to make your acquaintance. And please have a good rest of your day. So grateful.
You guys too. Bye now. Go Blue.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Jesus.